As we continue with our flow for the morning session, may I please request one of our main speakers of this session, Mr. Surendra Borad Patawari, to come and deliver his address. Before that, I'd like to give you a short introduction. Belgium-based Mr. Surendra Borad Patawari is the founder and chairman of Gemini Corporation. Gemini is engaged in sourcing and distribution of recyclable plastics, metals, and rubber, and annually handles over 2 million tons of scrap. Most of you in this room are very familiar with Mr. Surendra and all the work that he does, social and charitable as well. He's also one of the past recipients of the MRAI Global Recycler of the Year Award in 2016. So without any further delay, I'd please request Mr. Surendra to join us on stage and give his keynote address.
Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to take you to the year 2035. For all of us, the day of today is 8th February of the year 2035, not 2020. I'm looking at the list of dollar billionaires. I see the names of Mehtas, Shah, Nathanis, Gadawalas, Guptas, and many more recyclers. I wonder what happened during the last 15 years, from the year 2020 to 2035, that so many recyclers are in the billionaires list. Honorable Minister Sahib, members of Parliament, Mahesh ji, Poonam Benji, Sanjay Babu, committee members, ladies and gentlemen, and my fellow recyclers. The theme of my today's presentation is to inform you the key points, the trigger points which led to the prosperity during the period 2020 to 2035 in the recycling sector. The year 2020 was the takeoff year. The Prime Minister of India at that time, Mr. Modi, he placed Clean India and sustainability at the top of his agenda. He talked about floods, he talked about extreme weather conditions, he talked about receding glaciers, and he talked about sinking islands. He pushed India towards sustainability. Somebody informed Mr. Modi that during the year 1990, the Indian per capita income was higher than the Chinese per capita income. Indian per capita income was $368, and the Chinese per capita was $318. Somebody informed Mr. Modi that the Chinese industry have become very competitive because Chinese have been using 75% of the world global plastic, because the Chinese have been using 60% of paper scrap, and because Chinese have been using 50% of the global copper scrap and aluminum scrap. Indian government realized that the recycling industry provides a lot of employment. Every month, 1 million Indians entered the workforce for the first time, and a developed recycling industry could very well absorb them. Indian government decided to have a separate ministry, waste ministry and resource ministry, similar to United Kingdom. A very intelligent team, Niti Aayog, under the great leadership of Amitabh ji, unfortunately he is not here at the moment, developed recycling policy. Indian government constructed recycling parks, reduced GST on scrap and materials made from the recycled material, allowed extra depreciation allowance. We are still in the year 2035, I remind you. They allowed extra depreciation allowance similar to United States and Netherlands for the recycling industry. Some industrialists in India pressed the government to increase the import duty on metal scrap. Europe threatened to retaliate by way of carbon border tax. Normally, usually, nobody, no industry approves of any tax, but the imposition of carbon border tax by the European Union was a blessing in disguise for the scrap industry. And let me explain you a little bit more about the carbon border tax because it's going to be very important for the scrap industry. Europe is a large importer of materials and products from many countries, particularly from Asian countries like India and China. Europe wants to protect itself from cheap imports from those countries which have weaker climate policies. For instance, India is going to have a tough time in exporting cement from the year 2021 because the cement is the first commodity which is going to come under the carbon border mechanism in European Union. Let me give you one more real example from our own business. ArcelorMittal has to pay for carbon credit while producing steel in Europe. Mittalji is not obviously happy. He has to compete against steel imports from those countries where the producer don't have to pay for any carbon credit. The average carbon credit price at the moment is $2 per ton only. But the IMF says, and they insist, that we need $75 to reduce the global warming below 2%. And in case the world decides to have $75 per ton, the cost to the companies around the world will be $4 trillion. The chairman of Credit Suisse believes that this carbon credit would be traded more or less like the LIBOR dollar mechanism. The crux is this whole system is good for our recycling business because the goods produced from scrap would attract lower carbon tax. After hearing the outcry from Europe, India decided not to raise the duty, and rightly so. And the main point which I want to say to you that outside India, there was a revolution on recycling. Church of England, they had 10,000 crore rupees as investment funds. They decided to move into an index fund linked to carbon credit and climate change and sustainability. I still remind you, we are in 2035. European Central Bank announced it's one of the mandate climate change. International Accounting Standard Board set new standards incorporating climate change impact. The rules of economics also changed. Earlier, it was a belief that the prices of scrap materials, prices of recycled material made from scrap should be cheaper than the prices of virgin materials. That was not true anymore. Prices of materials made from recycled material became more expensive. Usually, you calculate direct cost, current overheads in the total costing. But during the period of 2020s, people started to include end-of-life costs as well. The responsible citizens and the green consumer of Greta generations, they realized they have to pay end-of-life cost as well. And they were willing to pay for the recycling. Recycling entrepreneur, they had access to plenty of capital. Credit Suisse reported that over $7 trillion were waiting for a home which passes the test of environmental, social, and governance criteria, ESG criteria. Can you believe, ladies and gentlemen, $15 trillion worth of investment in bonds were in negative territory. That meant not only you did not get any interest on your deposits, but you had to pay a levy for your fixed deposits. This amount was almost 40 times bigger than the loan book of State Bank of India. Europe earmarked $1 trillion for sustainability and carbon neutrality, particularly also in recycling. brand owners across the world made a commitment to use 25% or more materials for their production, and they needed 6 million tons alone. And there was a paradigm shift in the mindset of producers. Steel producers started to think of recycling as a license for their survival and growth. They extolled the virtues of green steel. Liberty founder, Mr. Sanjeev Gupta, argued that the steel made from scrap is good for the industry. And this situation was extremely beneficial for the steel scrap business. Prime paper industry, they were also doing a lot of things for sustainability. Even President Trump, he jumped to the main train of planting 1 trillion trees. He agreed to be part of that. And the low scrap prices of paper scrap contributed to more use. Here also, the paper scrap traders were very happy to see this situation. The virgin plastic producers, they gathered themselves in Singapore and formed an alliance to end plastic waste. This elite club of only CEO-led alliance earmarked $1.5 billion for investment in plastic scrap. I was fortunate to be invited as a board member, and the first point I raised as being as a board member, the gentleman, $1.5 billion is not sufficient. We need $100 billion. How much did I say? $100 billion. Because the issue of plastic waste is much, much bigger than being led to believe. We produced 300 million tons in the year 2020. And if we have to believe the words of McKinsey, the world produced 460 million tons in the year 2030, more than 1 million tons per day, 3,000 trucks per hour. The prime production was increasing by more than 3%, but the recycling was increasing by less than 2%. Plenty of opportunity in recycling, in collection, and in sales. Besides these products, other scrap, there were plenty of opportunities in textile waste, in rubber waste, in electronic waste. So because of so many favorable situations, ladies and gentlemen, you can very well realize how and why Mehtas, Nathanis, Shah, Guptas, Gadawalas became billionaires during the period 2020 to 2035. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me bring you back to the present year, to the year 2020. I tried to create an allegory, an imaginary scenario. I tried to present a picture of possible prosperity in recycling business. I tried to present you the elements necessary, the ingredients necessary for a success story in recycling business. You need capital, you need demand, you need supply, and government policies. Let me assure you, there is plenty of capital for scrap business. There will be plenty of demand for materials made from scrap, and there is plenty of scrap around us. What is needed are the blessings from the government. Blessings in the form of best recycling policies from around the world. I have been in this business for 31 years, working in 60 countries. And let me assure you, Honorable Minister Sahab Arjunji, honorable members of parliament, that you cannot find a business, an industry better than recycling industry for creation of employment opportunities, for better use of human resources, and for better use of limited resources. Recycling is being recognized all over the world. I was asked to make 3 presentations in World Economic Forum in Davos last month. And in each of these presentations, I included few sentences which I want to share with you. I said, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, that after waiting for 31 years, finally, I'm getting the respect and the dignity which I deserve as a recycler. respect from the public, respect from the press, respect from the politicians, and the respect from the producers. At every presentation, whenever I spoke these words, they were clapping, and I felt really good. बहुत अच्छा लगा बहनों भाइयों. I felt vindicated, and why not? We must be proud of what we are doing, what we do, because we change the lives of millions of people, because we make the world a better place to live. And let's hope and pray, with the blessings from the government, we turn this opportunity into a great partnership of public, planet, profit, and prosperity. Thank you so much.